Hi, everybody. I just want to say it's really encouraging. This is a really full room of people, and such great speakers this morning. Darren did a great job of explaining kind of the way identity and identity governance is impacting not only just government agencies, but the entire world, right? I mean, it's becoming a real key capability. We had a great time on the panel earlier. Colonel Clancy from DoD and the ICAM, the federal ICAM group. He's a co-chair on the ICAM subcommittee. That working together of the civilian agencies and DoD, it's a huge benefit to the government to be able to do that, because we're all trying to solve the same problem. All right. The big green button. Oh, there's one. Here we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CDM. I'll give you a little bit of where we came from, where we're at, and where we want to go. I am Ross Ford. I'm the ICAM SME at CDM, and I was the Phase 2 engineer, and I'll talk a little bit about how that changes, right? So CDM is moving from the term phases to capabilities. You're probably very familiar with this graphic. Jeremy showed it earlier, and he showed that we had phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the dashboard is still one of the main capabilities that CDM is going to provide for agencies, and we have 2 layers of the dashboard. Agencies get a dashboard where they get to look at all their object data, and then those agency dashboards feed up summary data to the federal dashboard, where we get a view of the entire federal government, the civilian federal government, and the risk that's associated with agencies in the federal government. As we drill down into what makes the CDM solution, the first thing we managed was assets, and we'll need to continue to manage assets. More assets will come into being. In particular, we were on premise. The perimeter focus was what we managed for Phase 1. And we know that the network perimeter is expanded. First of all, we have mobile devices, and now we're moving to cloud. So there's going to be additional assets, and we'll probably even be measuring them in different ways than we did with the on-premise assets. The next is the part that was near and dear to my heart was Phase 2, and that was about user assets, account assets. We'll continue to be doing more with identity and access management. As identity and access management becomes even a more important aspect of how we manage people, I think Darren did a great job, and we talked about zero trust networking. One of the attack perimeters kind of narrow to a few things: users, devices, resources, and so we will be managing more towards that. Under Defend, we've also been introducing the capabilities that we have to provide for network security management, and things like incident response, ongoing assessments. There's a number of capabilities that we'll be providing under network security management. And I think most telling is data protection management. That was previously called Phase 4. We're beginning able to do some of that today. We accelerated that. But the really important thing here is that data protection management it was the last capability we were introducing, because quite frankly, we didn't know how to identify the assets we needed to protect, and we still will struggle with that. It's hard for agencies to determine what is my sensitive data and what is not. So I worked with Jim Quinn, and we kind of figured out that we can start to make a cut at that, but that it's a complex problem, and we actually need all these supporting things in order to get to protecting data. So the other thing that CDM is doing under Defend, a recognition of where we were before CDM. It was kind of a compliance-driven world. The initial capabilities under CDM has been focusing on doing basic cyber hygiene, okay? Do you know the assets that you are actually supposed to be managing, right? Do you know who the users are, and do they have a suitability? So we allow them on the network. Basic hygiene. And some initial risk scoring indicators, right? Based upon those assets, we will have some risk scoring in the dashboards that people can look at, where they are vulnerable and where they have lower risk. But that's not the end game. We need to move to a threat-based risk management approach. And that will require changes to the dashboard and how we report information, changes to the aware scoring priorities. So we have aware risk scoring, and we may want to change the way things are weighted in that score based upon the environment that we're operating in, the risk environment. And then we want to be more performance-based in our ability to manage how we're going to manage risk, help agencies manage risk. So I mentioned earlier, this is kind of the general architecture, A, B, C, D. The tools and sensors are at the A level. That's where we get all the information. We integrate those, all those sensors at the integration layer. And then that moves up to an agency dashboard where agencies can see their particular risk profile of their assets in their agency, including user assets. And then a summary data moves up to the federal dashboard from that. So the first two task orders that I did for the CFO Act agencies were PRIV management and CRED management. And we'll talk about those primarily. There was also a task order for the non-CFO Act agencies called TO2F. And that is ongoing. It's a shared service that they're utilizing, and that's being built out today. But PRIV management and CRED management were the major task orders for phase 2, and they were completed in 2018. PRIV management actually probably would have normally come second in line, but we had an event in the government, and there was a cyber sprint, and the government asked CDM to accelerate the capabilities for managing privileged users, recognizing the risk that actually Darren talked about the first thing this morning. These privileged users are really important. So the PRIV management task order addressed strong authentication to those devices that had gaps around strong authentication. So after the cyber sprint, agencies were asked to reduce the number of privileged users they have and to use strong authentication to those devices. And we were to come in and help fill the gap where they were unable to do that. A lot of devices don't natively support the PIV card strong authentication. So we provided a capability under PRIV management to allow users to log in with their PIV card, administrative users to log in to the proxy, and the proxy manages a session to the target devices securely. Soon after that, we had CRED management task order, and that was kind of where we were intended to start. Control-Alt-Delete, you're logging on the network, you want to make sure everybody has access to a network that's an employee and a contractor. Do so with their PIV Smart Card. We made a big investment in it. Let's make sure everybody's using that investment, right? And both of those task orders helped me create a master user record. And I'm really thankful to SailPoint for having this today. And it was I was lucky. All three of the task orders, PRIV management, CRED management, and the TO2F task order, independently, the integrator chose the SailPoint product as the product to create the master user record. So instead of me having to, which I was prepared to do, instead of me having to create, master user record in these different products and how to integrate them, instead we formed a work group for the one product, and we came up with the master user record that would fit all the needs of the master user record for all the task orders. And what that master user record consists of is the key elements that I'm managing: behave, trust, PRIV, and CRED. And you'll see there's a relationship here, and it's a logical relationship. So if I'm going to give somebody a PIV card, a CRED, I need to make sure I can trust that guy, right? I need to make sure he had some suitability done, because that's what we require to get a PIV card. And if I'm going to give him privileges as an administrator, I also want to make sure that he's using that card, because I need to make sure that he has that trust. So it's this chain of trust that I have. And in addition, we know that our security control model requires everybody to do some security training, right? At a minimum, annual cybersecurity training, so we can teach them how to avoid phishing attacks, right? And so we want to measure that as well. And those are the key things that we're going to measure in the master user record in the first iteration here. And then I mentioned defend. So those task orders are complete. So that was first step. We're just starting to walk, right? Now we're going to walk with confidence. I'm not going to say we're going to run yet, but we're going to walk with some confidence. We have a master user record. DEFEND stands for Dynamic and Evolving Federal Enterprise Network Defense. Love that when they come up with those kind of acronyms. But DEFEND is a good term. And you can see that the CDM has priorities under this RFS priorities. So under DEFEND, agencies and CDM and agencies work together, and we come up with requests for services, and there's services and capabilities that we provide to the agencies. Under DEFEND, we're going to be much more dynamic in how we do that. Their agencies can have more input. But the priorities that we have as a CDM program are to help agencies manage their incident response reporting. There's some encryption capability for Bound E that we want to put in place. Ongoing assessments is really a key. And then you'll see above there, cloud and mobile. I mentioned that the previous task orders were focused on the perimeter-based network, right? The boundary perimeter network. Well, cloud and mobile will have to come into scope, and we have task orders that are going to be helping to do that. And then network access control. Building these segmentations in your network is very important, and assigning people to those different segments is a great security capability. I'm going to help agencies do that. And then this last one, gap fill. So under phase 1 and phase 2, although we tried hard, and we really pushed agencies to move as fast as they could, and probably pushed them faster than they really could, right? So they didn't complete the integrations of phase 1 and phase 2 capabilities, and we have gap fill RFSs that'll go out to help them complete what they weren't able to do in those 2 and 3 year task orders originally. Earlier I talked about how there's a great relationship between the CDM program and the ICAM subcommittee, the FICAM group there. In order to try to build these capabilities that I need in the future under DEFEND, I was putting together a work group at CDM to bring agencies together to kind of talk about how we'll do the next things we need to do under DEFEND. And Jim Shear reached out to me and said, is there any reason why we couldn't do that at the ICAM subcommittee? And I went, oh, no, not at all. I'm glad you asked. So we have a working group at the ICAM subcommittee that is going to help us plan for what capabilities do we want to put in place based, broad-based consensus by the agencies. Yes, this is what we want to do. And there's focus areas we have. First is the capability architecture. So the agencies are telling us what they have in place, their as is, and my integrators actually go capture some of that information. We've already come to an early agreement that will be leveraging the SailPoint Identity Lifecycle Manager to help provision users to the PAM solutions. So when we bought the SailPoint for the master user record, the governance and compliance module is what CGI Federal and all three of them had offered up as a solution, right? That doesn't give us the ability to manage the life cycle of the users. And early on, agencies were like, hey, I don't have Lifecycle Manager. Can you help me get it? So we actually bought some Lifecycle Manager for a few agencies that already had identified the need, and then we recognized that we need to continue with that. So we're building some requirements gathering around how to get more agencies Lifecycle Manager to manage the life cycle of their privileged users. And finally, it would be a set of solution recommendations, and we know the first solution recommendation, but there'll be subsequent recommendations. I mean, we're going to work with the ICAM subcommittee over time to build this plan so that CDMs are reacting to what the agencies need rather than prescribing for the agencies where we think they ought to go. So user lifecycle management with PAM. It really is foundational. And we talked earlier about the joiner, mover, leaver. So you got people coming in your agency, they kind of do different things over time, and finally they leave. You need to be able to manage that over time, right? In the federal government, we align the joiner event with the PIV card issuance, generally speaking. Entitlements change over time, and we need to be able to manage those entitlements. And we have a way, and we need to have a way that we know, oh, you used to do this, and now you're doing this. Well, we don't want to have the entitlement for your old job. We want to have the entitlements that are appropriate for your current job. That reduces the attack surface, of the individual, privileged individual in the network, to what he should be doing at the appropriate time. So this is what we think it's going to look like for the near term. I mean, it's a diagram, but I wanted to talk about all the capabilities, how they fit into CDM, and what we think, at least through the next few iterations, we'll have in place when we build this out. So if you look here at the lower left, personnel management, and then I have my trust, cred, behave, and priv. Those are the measures that we're taking right now, and they will be, that information will move up to the dashboard over the next year or so. In fact, in the small agencies, the TO2F agencies, they're already moving information to the dashboard, and in some leading agencies, that's happening already. I didn't get dashboard integration under Priv Manager or Cred Management because the dashboard tool that we use wasn't ready for user information to be in the dashboard. It is now, and so that information can move up when we're ready to do that. The big box is Identity IQ, and the capabilities that we really are going to take advantage of in the future with identity and lifecycle management. The access requests, the access certifications are certainly key capabilities that actually, identity management, it's kind of funny that it hadn't been adopted more widely because it's the only architectural component in security I can think of that actually provides a return on investment. It can improve the agency's ability to do the mission that they want to do from a business perspective. I think it's been lost on so many people, and I guess it's going to take just us doing it and people using that capability and seeing the benefit for them. They'll go, well, I didn't know that would help me out in my mission. I thought it was going to be a thing that hurt me, right? So anyway, I'm really, those capabilities right there, the access request and the access certification are really important because access request allows you to say, I need this access, somebody approves it, now you're provisioned to the system. And access certification, I don't know how many of my friends that work in Active Directory are in there every week running some kind of access certification report so they can figure out who's in there and who should be in there and all that stuff, right? Automated provisioning, the policy model and role models. I really do think as we go to this next level with the PAM integration, we're going to help agencies understand how to manage roles. And the easiest way to manage roles are two. First of all, it's easy to manage the enterprise role. You're a guy, you come work for an agency, I give you an Active Directory account, I'm going to give you an email account. That's a no-brainer, right? So that kind of birthright provisioning when you come on board is pretty no-brainer. And then for the privileged users, I've specified that we're only managing privileged users that have infrastructure impact. So that's network administrators, systems administrators. It's easier because the scale of those groups are less, that you could create a role for those, and then the person can be assigned to that role before he can get an entitlement. And if he doesn't have that role, he shouldn't be getting an entitlement to do an administrative access on a system. So we'll be introducing roles around privilege management. You can see that we have the privilege account management tool. A lot of systems don't allow native authentication with the smart card. So the PAM tool allows you to log into there and get proxy to the devices, and many types of devices can you get proxy to. And you'll see down below, we started with on-premise apps, but we actually had some agencies that were already managing servers in the cloud, and so they're using the PAM tool that we put in place to manage the users accessing those servers. And on the bottom, end user authentication. Currently, I'm focusing on the PIV smart card. If there's other authenticators that become available that we can use, and if an agency has already determined they want to use some different authenticator, and they have policy to support it, we'd be happy to support that too, because the identity manager can provision accounts and provision services any place of any type we need to, right? Oh, and then mobile device managers. That's also something that for some agencies, they had MDMs in place, and we used the PAM tool to authenticate privileged users to those devices. So I'm going to close here, and I just want to show that the environment becomes pretty complicated as we introduce these other avenues. So down here, you have the trusted internet connection, and this has got a remote office, a data center, and an office building. That's kind of been the main target of what we have been doing for phase 1 and phase 2. But now we need to consider maybe people in another agency have to get access to, say, cloud service, right? And they both work out of the same cloud service. So let's say somebody's doing Office 365, and you're getting Office 365 from a the public location instead of a private cloud for Azure. Well, then more than one person is accessing that service as well. So you need to make sure that identity is done, very well in that regard to people get the right access to the right stuff. Over here, this indicates that mobility is really important, and some of the mobility, when I use my Office 365 on my phone, that is, I mentioned earlier, I've got Derived PIV on here. It creates a VPN tunnel, a private network tunnel, back to the service that is providing Outlook 365 for me, or Office 365. But there'll be some people coming in probably through other connections, right, to your environment, through your wireless access gateways. Anyway, the whole point of this is to show it's a much more complicated environment that we'll be going to manage. And CDM knows we need to manage all those capabilities, and we'll be building services to do that as appropriate over time. Defend gives us the flexibility to do that. I mentioned that CDM has some priorities. But we've already gotten something like 100 RFSs from agencies, not necessarily aligned with those priorities, but things that they, we have a lot of agencies, right? But things that they want to do at their agencies that they need CDM to help fund. We adjudicate those RFSs, and if we have funding and it aligns with our desires as well as theirs, then we help agencies acquire those services and those capabilities too. So I've got a few minutes for questions, and I'm happy to take them. Well, that's good. I explained it well. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.